Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And today, well, I was outside, but basically it was working on the inside and not in the inside, but inside. We are in the process of moving my sister's eBay store. We're moving it to my my marketplace, and I have been busy in listing, and I've been busy in answering messages and making arrangements for pickup, and already things are moving a little bit better. I also had time to take in a little bit of content today, and one of my favorite light content is a gentleman who has a YouTube channel here in Canada, yeah, actually in Edmonton, Curiosity Incorporated. And he is also not just a thrifter, he's a real reseller. He does estates, he does hoarding houses, he does auctions, right? And he's been shipping and stuff to the States, and he's recently found himself in the exact same situation. And I don't mean to laugh because it is difficult. He lost $5,000 in trying to get product to his customers, and it is frustrating quite often when people try and play games with you, or people just outright take what doesn't belong to them. And so I watched that, and I'd already today been in the process of moving my sister's store over to my marketplace. And I sympathized with them, and I understood because my sister she's actually heartbroken over not being able to sell on eBay, at least to the States. And for the most part, I would say 80% of her customers come from the States, but it just doesn't make sense. So it's not just Canadians that are losing out on it, like I was talking about a little bit yesterday, but the customers are losing money. eBay is losing money. UPS, FedEx, oh my goodness, people are chasing them down like a witch hunt because they're losing product, they're being charged overcharged in different fees, and being tagged with invisible fees at the same time. And then understandably we can see that the stock isn't getting to the customer, and it's not getting back to the person who actually shipped it off. And so I found it really interesting. It gave me a little bit of confidence in what we're doing is probably the best thing that we possibly could do. And in all actuality, I am making sales in the process, which is the confirmation and the evidence that we are making a good decision in what we're doing. But it doesn't change the heartbreak, especially when my sister, especially, has been a reseller probably now for, oh my goodness, just over 30 years. Anyway, she has been an eBay seller. For myself, I used to sell fur coats on eBay when I used to get them very inexpensively. I gave that up when I got married, and I never started it up again. I gave up that resale because that was a way for me to put a roof over my head without losing my freedom to be able to pull in my own income. And I gave that up when I got married and never started up again because those jobs and positions that I had, a stable paycheck is always pretty amazing to make sure that you know exactly what you're going to be bringing in during the course of the month, if you're not like a millionaire or gazillionaire, right? That you have that idea of how you can budget to get yourself by. month to month. And remember, I'm single. I don't have kids. I don't have a husband in the moment that I can imagine how difficult it is to trust and rely that that money is always going to be flowing, especially when you do have a wife and children who depend on that, for the groceries in the cupboard, the roof over their heads, education in the moment, and education if they want to go to university or college, right? So in that adapt and conquer, that's exactly what you've got to do, right? You've got to adjust, and right, it's scary, it's frustrating, and it's heartbreaking, especially when you've been doing something as long as my sister has. And another inquiry. Um, I better turn that down because I'll probably get a few of those during the course of the live, right? I just listed some real goodies that my sister and I had picked up over the course of the past, well, half a dozen years or so. And some of them recently, some of them have been shelf sitters for a long time. But it's really kind of neat seeing the inquiries coming in and people making arrangements to pick things up. We feel better about that. And I think, once my sister feels and sees that money flowing back into her bank account, that she'll feel a lot better about this big move that she's making. In the moment, I'm giving her a hand in that because she's still working full time in that job that's been putting the roof over her head, right? So because I am not employed at this moment, that right in that idea of right being an entrepreneur, I took on that responsibility. And I would anyway, because this is my sister, right? And she's done so much for me in the past. These trips that I take every year, that comes from these sales that we make. Me and her, we go thrifting all the time. We pick up scores and items and we list them. As of recently, we were doing it separately, right? But we've come back together, right? Right. We really stopped going out. As soon as I got back from my holidays in September, I just kind of took a break from everything, right? The lessons were getting heavy, right? And that movement that I want to make for myself became a priority. It was always the priority. But again, we have to do what we have to do in order to, right, apply ourselves in what we really want in setting those goals, right, for ourselves and achieving some of those dreams, right? I've been managing decently, right? There are those small moments when right, you give up those luxuries that you were used to in order to have that freedom. But that is a sacrifice that I'm willing to make. I'm only 9 months away from officially uh, being able to bring in a pension every month. I can't believe it. Time goes so fast. And the funny thing is about that is because I feel the same way as I did in my, when you're younger, a little bit of a party girl and working in bars and nightclubs and having that little bit of gumption to go off and explore and do new things. Of course, as we get older, those things not necessarily go to the wayside, because if you've hung out with me for any length of time, that I am an adventurer, an explorer in life. Hello, Eugene. Thank you so much. I'm doing good tonight. Thank you. I always appreciate when Eugene comes in. He's pretty dedicated. If he's not doing something, he's usually hanging out with me at night. And if you guys ever want to pop in, I go live Monday to Friday, and it's usually around 9 o'clock, within a few minutes before or a few minutes after, usually 5 minutes after. Right. Today I was almost on time, but I was watching Lex Fridman and his friend Paul Rosalie. They've been friends for quite a while. Paul Rosalie, he actually is I don't know what he is. He lives in the jungle, and and he's been doing his own adventures. He definitely an adventurer himself, right? But they met up with a tribe, like a right. And you guys have seen those photographs and stuff, right? Of these tribes that have never connected with modern man in any way. They're right, totally. What do they call them? Non-contact with humans, and they humans with with modern man, right? So, and they can't go near these tribes or anything because, well, you know what happened when the Europeans and the Spanish came to North America. We wiped out a lot of the indigenous, like, oh my goodness, it was like 50 to 80% of the population wiped out by diseases that their systems had never been in contact with, right? So they weren't allowed to actually have physical contact with these indigenous groups out in the jungle. But oh my goodness, I was enthralled by that. And I'm still kind of on the fence about how I feel about that because I don't think if they wanted to have contact with modern man, I think it probably would have happened by now. But in those happen chance, it did happen. And what comes of that now, I don't know. Right? They threw them some shirts, so they've got some modern shirts now. One guy had a machete that he picked up somewhere, right? But yeah, they are warriors, these people, like true warriors. And I was kind of enthralled in that. So I gave myself that extra minute today just to finish. I think they're just saying their goodbyes and tying up the show now. But oh my goodness, so interesting. Lex Fridman really is friends with lots of interesting, smart, adventurous people. And yeah, and we benefit by that because they're always happy to support their friend and come in and talk about their adventures and discoveries. And yeah, so, we all have our favorites when it comes to television shows or books, right? The genres of the books, YouTube videos, right? Sports, that we all have different interests. And for a lot of people, they wouldn't find that interesting. But for a lot of people, they would find it interesting, wouldn't they? And I certainly did. I certainly wouldn't want to meet up with any of them. Oh my goodness, I'd probably be dragged off. Well, they probably wouldn't drag me off into the out into the jungle. They probably like shoot their bows and arrows at me and just take care of business right on the spot because what use am I, right? It's not like I can produce babies in the moment or anything. So, right, unless they needed some help cooking. Right? Okay, you guys. So, it has been a busy day for me. And I thought maybe we'd just come in and we just grab our card tonight and go into it for a few minutes. I hope everybody is having an amazing day, an amazing week. We're coming up to almost the end of the week. This week went really fast. But that's the thing, when I'm busy, time goes fast. And when I'm not busy, when I'm spacing out, when I'm dozing, when I'm going for my evening walks or my afternoon walks, time just goes so slow, right? And it is in that keeping ourselves busy that we lose. And that's a good sign too, because when you're having a good time, when you're accomplishing things, when you're immersed in what you're doing and time goes by, right? That's a good thing as far as I'm concerned anyway. Okay, so you guys, if you never hung out with me before, these are 54 powerful words. This is a deck that I put together because words are so important, not just in the way that we communicate, but in the meanings, right? In the meanings of these words. And lots of times, right, we don't pay attention to the world around us. And the world is always giving us messages, always giving us clues, always giving us insight. But because we're so preoccupied in what we're doing, or like I said, dozing out and not paying attention, we miss all these gifts, all these understandings, all these insights, right? That come across our path. And it's just not the insight, the adventures, even, the amazing experiences that and opportunities that we can miss because we're just not paying attention because we're so immersed in something else. So I put this deck together of powerful words just as a little bit of evidence for each one of us to see how that word reflects in our life, right? How it comes across our past in numerous different ways, whether it's conversations, maybe it's on a sign as you sitting on the bus, or maybe it's in a conversation that you have with a coworker, and it's just a way to catch your attention. And I bet you, if you just paid attention to that one word once we do the word, more than likely, right? In those conversations and experiences and adventures that you have during the course of the day, that you might take note each time that word comes across your path and stop for a moment and see, maybe contemplate for a few minutes, reflect on that experience and see if it has something to offer you. Okay, you guys, here we go. We're going to pick a card, 54 powerful words, lots of words in here that I haven't picked yet, lots of cards in here also that I consistently pick. And that's the truth. But that means something too for each one of us individually. Okay, you guys, here we go. This one wants to come out. This is one of these cards that I consistently get. If you hung out with me for any length of time, and if you're going to come in sometime this evening or tomorrow during the day, say right now, what word do you think we pulled today? I bet you guys could guess because there's only right? There's a few cards in here that I consistently get, but this one really stumps me. You guys, say it now. Eugene, do you know what card I pulled tonight? I bet you Eugene knows because he's here with me all the time and he watches me pull these cards. But the word we got today is community. Community offers up a sense of belonging. And you know what? Oh my goodness, Kathy knew it, right? It means something. When I first started on YouTube, it was small moments of reveals to me, and those little tidbits when we talk about, these things that come across our path and catch our attention. And hello, Kathy. Hello, Kathy. And isn't it strange how often we grab this card? And it's so important. When I first started waking up to some of these ideas, I had my group picked, right? I still love this. Well, I love these thought leaders. I love the missions. I love their community. I've actually immersed myself in a couple of events in this community. And if you guys have been with me for any length of time, right, you know, I went to Minneapolis to see Evan Carmichael when he went on tour of the States. And then I went to see him again in Toronto when he did a Thought Leadership Academy. I racked my credit card. I lost my credit card. And I was so determined that I just had to go. After I went to Minneapolis, I says, I have to go to Toronto too. And because I do these trips all the time, I just kind of tied it all together. And I was convinced this was my crew. It had been my intent to actually move along with this group. But in the moment, it never really worked out for me in that way. And, you know, we all, in our own choices, um, get to decide for ourselves, you know, how we're going to move, right? Who we're going to bring on board, who's a good fit, right? Who's a good fit for any community, because it's important that we care, that we support, that we hold each other up. And not only that, that we have the same values. That's how come I love my crew so much, right? And even though we don't possibly live specifically in those values, because we know each other so well, they know what those base values are, those foundation values are with my brand, and we get along so well. Community offers up a sense of belonging, right? In the moment, I thought I belonged in that group. Part of me still feels not necessarily like every individual in that group, because you know when you start joining in a new community, you don't know anybody. All you have are your senses and in your own being to be able to make a connection, to have a conversation, to be able to feel out each other, to see if each individual person in that community is a good fit. And it is very rare that that happens, right? Usually you find a few in a group and you know, you make those connections where you can. Even within our own family, we can find that we are a little bit on the outskirts, right? That we are not part of that community because we don't feel like we belong, right? And I grew up, you know, feeling that part of my family had outed me in that had put me off to the side. But then the other half of my family loved, supported, encouraged, right? And so you have to feel it out and find your community sometimes within a community, right? Because you can go into community and not feel like you fully fit in that. And lots of times, especially if, if you belong to a community like my own immediate family, as it expands, as you bring in son in laws and brother in laws and uncles and nieces and cousins, that we get to realize that blood doesn't really mean anything. It is in that relational aspect of ourselves that we can actually make these amazing connections with each other. But in those communities, right, it's those base values, right? It's those boundaries that we, each one of us have to set up for ourselves, because we know that in every community there are stinkers. In communities, a lot of people are not genuine, right? And they'll portray themselves as something that they're not. And, I don't mind rough around the edges. I don't mind con- controlling, even narcissistic, right? Because I do have controlling and narcissistic members in my own family. And even for myself, because we are who we surround ourselves with, that I have those same narcissistic, or maybe not the same, but I have my own set of narcissistic tendencies. Some of them I had to work out of my system. Some of those narcissistic and controlling aspects of myself got kind of pounded out, pounded out of me. But at the same time, right, in setting those boundaries now, that I feel that I could probably move about in a community in using those baseline values. I think, in my own experience, I think it's something that would benefit the world. Now that that each one of us is this close to each other now, that it's important that as a whole, you live in a country, the country has rules. You go to a job, your job has rules, your job has policies that we have to follow in. And if we, right, don't want to follow in those ones, then it's up to management or ownership to decide, are we a good fit? And it's also up to the employee, because you're an employee, you do have to follow the rules, right? You get to decide by your own boundaries, right? And by your own set of values, because you have your values, then you have company values, right? And then you have those personal values of each person in that community. And even here, I'm sure I've got some serious potty mouths, right? That hang out with us on Sunday night. But you would never hear any in any of the comments. You wouldn't hear the swear words, right? You would never see them in the comments, right? At least I never see them. I have a great crew, great monitors over there that they would just zip them out of there real fast, because in my brand, in that small community that I'm building up with my brand, they know we're just, right. Swearing is just not proper, and which brings me also to talk about community. There is another thought leader that I really appreciate, and he has the very same one word as I do, which is kindness. And kindness is so important, especially in my experience in my life. And it's why it's part of uh my values, is the fact that, it's what I put out there for everybody, right? It is in my intent to always be kind no matter what, even, right, when I'm putting my foot down or putting in those controlling aspects of myself, right? Setting the rules that I get to make those choices, right? And you know, it just happened that way, because it's not the way I grew up. My dad didn't allow swearing in the house. And as long as I was in the house, swearing wasn't allowed, right? This was part of my father's baseline values, right? Every once in a while, he let out the SHIT word, right? He says, I don't swear, you guys. But even for myself, I have let one of those swear words like just fly. And right again, in not paying attention and taken by surprise, or right, really being hurt, or being an empath, that we're mirroring back to somebody else who's a potty mouth, right? No disrespect to the potty mouths, because there are potty mouths that I love to death, like Gary Vaynerchuk. Do you know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, Kathy? Yeah, he's a thought leader. I think he's out of, oh, I can't, New York? Is he? No, maybe not New York. I'm not quite sure. I can't say for sure where he's from because I don't go into his content a lot. Why? Because he potty mouths, right? And it doesn't sit well in my system. He sits well in my system. I love his ideas. I love his contribution to the world and his optimistic, right? And that word kindness that me and him share and move together with. Well, we don't move together, but we're both moving. We're both moving in that. But as a whole, right, I'm not part of that community, right? And we all get to choose. We all get to choose, and no disrespect, because each person gets to choose how they want to live their lives, how they want to express themselves, how they want to treat others, but they can't be, well, I was going to say hurt, but let's just say not feel disrespected because, he's not my number one, right? That he is not one of my favorites. So that, uh, I'll never be, um, right. I feel because we're both doing that inspiration, motivation, right? That moving forward. We're both doing that. So we're part of the community that way. But for me to come in and take his lessons, right? And every second word out of his mouth is an F word or an SHIT word. And right, I would be uncomfortable with that, and something in my system fires up. And I suspect when it fires up like that, that's those other parts of me. I worked in bars and nightclubs. My dad had a few swear words. My husband was a big potty mouth person, right? And it bothered me, right? But he was my husband and I loved him. And of course, for the people that you love, sometimes we have to accept some of the bad with the good. But for each one of us, we get to decide what's most important, what can be tolerated in that, and what's the contribution. And my husband loved me so much, right? I couldn't imagine that there would be anything unless he physically or mentally or emotionally hurt somebody, because these are my base values. Like, by right, kindness is so important, and I don't want to see that kindness projected onto others. And the reason my word is kindness is because, well, that's what I want to put out to the world, but also I believe that's what I need the most, right? And that's the way I learned. That was one of the first lessons that I learned, and I feel that to be true in my heart, right? Community offers a sense of belonging. We all have different communities, right? I have my community of my sisters. I have my community on Marketplace. I have my community here, right? And who's to say, as we move along, this idea of this word, what was I talking about? Paying attention to what comes across our paths, the word, right? So I'll be paying pretty much attention to how this word fits in my day, fits in my life, fits in my relationships and potential relationships until I come back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And maybe I'll have an interesting story for you, right? Maybe this is not for me, right? Maybe, right? This is an offering to somebody that popped into my life tonight, that it came across their path. And just to pay attention in the next 24 hours, how this word community comes into your life in all different ways, right? I understand community offers up a sense of belonging, but I have belonged my entire life, right? This word freedom is feeling really, really good to me. We've had that word freedom a few times too, but not like this word community. This word community comes up all the time. I even trimmed it a little bit smaller because I thought that it was probably big in my deck, and then I didn't want to keep having it pop up, right? So it finds its way. And so that's something for me to pay attention to, right? The things that come across our path, and not just in me pulling up a card, but in your own experiences, right? It could be a conversation that you have with a loved one, and then for the next 24 hours, you're bumping into other people and you're having experiences and adventures and opportunities. And you might get that, oh my goodness, right? Because if you didn't have note of that word, you might miss out in all the amazing things that are trying to come across our path because we're so busy in what we're doing or what we're not doing when we space out. Kathy, Eugene, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming into my live tonight, right? Yeah, really interesting how often this word comes out. Just kind of given up on trying to find new ways to express this word community, right? Because I wanted to make sure it came up so often. I was just like, different perspective, different perspective, different perspective. What am I not getting right? Different perspective, different perspective. And then you know what? I need to go back to base one and see how that works. You guys, community. Community offers up a sense of belonging. It's a good card, right? It just trips me up a little bit every time I see it pop up because I know it means something. Okay, you guys, have a great night. That's my good cheer. We'll see you tomorrow.